Hello and welcome to a new episode of That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. My name is Françoise, and this month I've been doing episodes on the different phases of your cycle and on how to harness the power of each phase of your cycle for your fertility and your overall well being. As you may hear, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is very, let's call it sexy, but I should be fine to record this podcast. Um, so the idea behind this whole series on the different phases of your cycle and how to use them when you're trying to get pregnant is that when you're trying to conceive, you're already tracking your cycle, probably, right? And it can become really technical and triggering even, especially when I think of something like getting your period or just a 2 week wait. Those are like very intense times during your cycle. But in general, just keeping track of your cycle, it's all about conceiving a baby, right? It's about finding out when you're ovulating, working with that, and then waiting to see if it happened. Um, so what I want to do with all of these episodes on the different phases of your cycle is to expand your horizon a little bit and to show you that you can use that hyper focus on your cycle that's probably already there to your benefit and to really boost your fertility as well. Because that's a key discovery I made on my own fertility journey is this awareness of your cycle. It really provides you with a superpower also if you use it in the right way, because it can be a great tool to get to know yourself intimately and to also become really good at reading your body and knowing what it needs from you. Now, so far, I've covered the 2 week wait, the phase of your period. I also recorded a separate episode on pregnancy loss because that is technically, I would say, a phase of the menstrual cycle as well. And today I'm covering the follicular phase. Now, that's the day, usually, or in a technical sense, the follicular phase lasts from the day that you get your period up until ovulation. It's called the follicular phase because this is the period that your eggs are maturing within your follicles. But when we're talking menstrual cycle awareness, so the thing that I'm talking about today, the follicular phase is generally used to indicate the phase between your period and ovulation. So we can also call it just the pre-ovulation phase, or if we want to work with the seasons, you can call it your inner spring. Summer would be ovulation, autumn would be the 2 week wait, winter would be your menstruation, and then inner spring is this period between getting your period and ovulation. And what I will do in this episode, as I did in all of the other episodes as well, is that I'll quickly dive into what's happening at the hormonal level. And I explain how that affects you at the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual level. Because once you understand this connection, you can also use a number of strategies to really harness the power of this part of your cycle, not just for your well being, but also for fertility. I will touch on that at the end of this episode, like really practical things that you can do with your cycle during this phase. But let's start with the hormones. So, what happens during the follicular phase? During the entire phase, so both during menstruation and during that pre-ovulation phase, estrogen is the dominant hormone at play. Once you reach puberty, your hypothalamus, so that is the command center in your brain, starts sending a signal to the pituitary gland in your brain to start producing FSH. So that's the follicle stimulating hormone. Now, as its name suggests, um, FSH stimulates your ovarian follicles to start growing rapidly, and it also helps the eggs that are inside to mature. And then around day 6 of your cycle, usually one dominant follicle prevails and starts to produce estrogen. And that is then a signal to your brain that it can stop producing FSH because no more follicles need to mature at this time. There's this one follicle where, if you might end up with twins if there's two dominant follicles, but usually it's just one. That follicle starts to produce estrogen. Your brain knows it can stop producing FSH. Estrogen also causes the lining of your womb to thicken, making it a really comfortable place for that embryo to nest. Um, Another thing that estrogen does is that it also stimulates the production of cervical mucus. So that helps the sperm pass through your vagina and through your cervix all the way up to the fallopian tubes to fertilize the egg. So that's actually a crucial part of fertility as well, is having that very fertile cervical mucus. And this is already an important piece of information because if you're experiencing vaginal dryness at this time during your cycle, this may be an indication, or this probably is an indication that you're not producing enough estrogen. Now, estrogen or mucus, it changes as you age. So, in your 20s, you might have 4 days of that really nice egg white, stretchy discharge, especially during ovulation. As you get older, maybe it's 1, 2, 3 days. So, but if you have none at all, and that's something that really happened to me, or that's something I noticed during my fertility journey, is I had no good fertile cervical mucus. That is a clear indication from your body that something's up and you need to look at your hormonal balance. So this is a time of estrogen. Um, I want to say dominance, but that's a different condition. So estrogen is really rules this part of your cycle, that follicular phase. Um, and it affects you physically, emotionally, spiritually. Generally speaking, the surge of estrogen will make you feel really energized, motivated, interested in the outer world. It wants to it wants you to put yourself out there basically so you can attract a mate and get pregnant, right? That's the role of estrogen. And this is a really big contrast also with that menstrual phase that you just came out of, where your body naturally wanted to withdraw and go within. So this phase, the pre-ovulation phase or the follicular phase of your cycle, is much more aligned with the energy of the world that we live in, right? It's you feel, or I would say the world is high paced, there's a lot of overachievers out there. We all have this drive to perform. Then there's social expectations. We all should be beautiful, sensual, outgoing. Um, and that's often what we would like to feel like all the time. And during this follicular phase, the pre-ovulation phase, it's there for you. You're in your inner spring. I found a great quote in the Wild Power book. It's a book I'll put in the show notes as well, book recommendations, really on menstrual cycle awareness. And a lot of this information actually comes from that book. But they said, what's so special about spring is that it can also really help you recapture the same freedom and unburdened ease that young children feel. So the immediacy that allows them to be unhurried and deeply absorbed in the unfolding opportunities for play, experimentation, and wandering. And that's, I feel, like one of the key powers of this phase, especially when you're on the fertility journey and life can feel so heavy. And it all revolves around getting pregnant, around reaching a certain goal that's not attainable. It sort of sucks the fun and joy out of life. So in this phase of your cycle, there's also an opportunity to start reconnecting with that side of yourself that is joyful, that knows how to play, that isn't hurried to reach a goal. I'm not saying like you shouldn't, there's no judgment here. It's just saying like you can find back a bit more balance by really working with this phase of your cycle. And maybe, as I mentioned, all of these things like feeling energized, feeling ready to get out there, or feeling like this childlike playfulness. Maybe you don't recognize this at all when you think like, my life doesn't, or my inner world doesn't feel like that at all. Um, if you're not tracking your cycle yet, I would suggest that you start doing that. So, with menstrual cycle awareness, it can really help if you write down a couple of sentences every day. It can even just be 1 or 2 sentences that sort of capture the essence of the day. How did you feel? I have sentences there where, sometimes I write things like, today I'm just floating through life. Or maybe it's like, today I feel so vulnerable and everything that happens around me, it just touches me deep in my core, right? That sort of captures the essence of the day. Now, once you do this for a couple of months, you can start to notice there's differences throughout the month. So maybe once you start writing, these daily recaps, you start noticing actually there are a couple of days throughout the month where I feel that energy, that playfulness. I just wasn't aware because we like to focus. That's how our minds are wired. We usually focus on the negative and not so much on the positive. So just by starting to notice it, um, you may realize that, oh, there's already a bit more balance in my life than I'm aware of, and now I can really start working with that energy. Or maybe, and this is actually something that happened to me right now, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Maybe you feel like I don't feel that surge of energy at all. Like I come out of my menstrual phase and I'm just depleted. I don't feel invigorated. There's no spark. That's actually quite crucial information as well. Um, it can be that you just feel much more at ease in that more quiet, introspective energy of winter. Maybe it's just where your comfort zone is. Not everyone likes summer, right? There are also people who really enjoy winter and cozying up inside. Or a bit more introverted and feel like, oh, there's so much pressure after menstruation. I don't like the surge of energy really. So maybe that's just like a personal preference. That can be the case. Maybe you realize, with the notes that you're taking, that there's actually some trauma or some inner wounds that you need to look at. Maybe you notice that, oh, that surge of sensual energy that's here with the rise of estrogen, that's a side of me that I've always tried to suppress. So when I feel that coming up every month, there's a day where I just shut down because it's too much for my system to carry. So that can be important information as well. Or, and maybe I should have started with this one because I feel this is actually the most important one. But what happened with me right now is that um, this I just received a sign that something was off, which is also why there was no podcast episode last week. I was actually supposed to record this episode last week. I thought, well, that's great. I'm in my follicular phase because I'm also recording these episodes with my cycle. So I thought, okay, that will be an easy episode to do because I'll be in that energized state, happy to play, recording the podcast. I know, that's the beauty of menstrual cycle awareness. I know coming out of menstruation that I'm to expect that surge in energy and inspiration, and it wasn't there. And if I look at my diary now, I just wrote down, I feel tired. I'm not ready to come out of my menstruation cave just yet. And that stayed the same throughout my whole follicular phase. So that tells me there's something off. Um, it might be physical. I have had some other indications that my thyroid hormones might be off. So I did ask my doctor to get some blood work done on my thyroid, my iron levels, B12, vitamin D levels. These are all things that can affect your energy levels, and they're all crucial when you're trying to conceive, by the way. So if you haven't done so, making sure your thyroid levels, your iron levels, B12, vitamin D levels are, in a good shape. It's definitely something you need to look into, especially if, like me, you don't have that surge of energy during your follicular phase, so after menstruation. But the reason why you're not experiencing that surge may also be more emotional or energetic. So maybe you didn't have time to really respect the need for rest in your winter during your menstrual phase. And as I mentioned during the episode on menstruation, this is actually a natural built-in recalibration point in your cycle where your nervous system gets to, yeah, experience deep rest. That's what you can use your menstruation for. We put ourselves under so much pressure all the time that we actually really need those couple of days during menstruation to go within, to withdraw from life, and to recharge. Um, in my case, I know that I actually had a really good rest. I took a couple of days off during my menstruation this month, so I know that this is not the reason why I'm feeling depleted. Um, but this is something that you can look at for yourself. So then, I did get my hormones checked, but another thing, even if you did take enough rest during your menstruation, it may also be that you're just overextending yourself more generally, or that you're not receiving enough nourishment. So a really good idea is then to go back to your journal and see if there's any themes that came up during the 2 week wait. As I explained on the episode on the 2 week wait, there's this inner critic usually pops up. We like to call it PMS, but your mind, what we call bitching or the inner critic, it's actually your subconscious mind telling you that something's not right, that something needs to change for the better. So if you've been tracking, if you've been journaling, then during the 2 week wait, you might get some really good insights into where in your life you need to start taking better care of yourself, where you need to start setting better boundaries. In my case, what really came up during my 2 week wait is that I had lost my inner fire. I was working on autopilot and I didn't have a vision any longer of where I wanted to go to, move towards in my work, in my life. And I hoped that by taking those days during menstruation, that's usually the case, that these visions would come to me, and they didn't. So um, I feel that that's an element of why I'm not feeling super energized right now, is because I've been going on autopilot for too long. And that's also a reason why I took off last week. It's okay, let's stop doing things just because I put out a podcast episode every week. It doesn't mean I have to do that this week as well. Let's just take a break and see what wants to come. Not much is coming yet. But yeah, just to illustrate the information, this is not necessarily fertility related, but it is a creative journey as well as fertility is. This is really how you can use the inner critic of the 2 week wait to tell you where you need to start paying more attention. And then if you notice during that follicular phase that something is off, you don't see that surge of creative energy, go back to your notes and see what it is it's really a diagnostic tool that you can work with. But there's other things you can do during this phase as well. Um, so this was really about, what you can do when you don't have the surge of energy, but what do you do when you do feel that surge of energy? How can you use that as a superpower to transform your fertility journey, to transform your general sense of well-being? Now, first of all, this is actually the best time of your cycle to introduce new healthy habits. So, if there's something that you want to invest in to support your fertility, maybe eating more healthily, getting more exercise in, do it now. Do it during this phase of your cycle. You have about 10 days, depending on the length of your cycle, to start a new habit before you switch to the more moody inner autumn. So, your 2 week wait, when it's much harder to keep going. So, what you want to be doing now is really lay the groundwork because change is easier at this point, and that means you will be more likely to keep it up during the remainder of your cycle. More generally speaking, this is just a great time to experiment with new things. So not just introducing new habits, but also, if your fertility journey has been a really challenging one, this is a time where you should plan to do, sorry, where you should plan to do fun stuff and sort of get new input. Um, Not to take your mind off of fertility, but to really feel that spark of aliveness within you again. So get out of your house, and socialize with the right kind of people. Maybe not find, triggering kinds of people. But take a new class, go dancing, do anything that connects you to that inner child who just wants to play. That's what this phase is about. And don't get me wrong, I know how challenging this can be. Especially if you're in treatment, this is a time when you'll be going in and out of your clinic for scans and you're taking hormones. And actually, a lot of attention is going to that fertility journey. But see if you can make this week about more than fertility. That's my homework really for you. Do at least one thing just for the fun of it. One thing that makes you feel alive during this time. Um, it will do wonders for your well-being, but it will also do wonders for your nervous system. If you do something fun, if you do something spontaneous just for the sake of it, it tells your nervous system that you're safe. It tells your body that you're safe. And then when your body feels it's safe, it will move into the feed and breed response. So ultimately, this will benefit your fertility as well. But that's not why I want you to do this. This is just to give you permission to do this. But I want you to do this because it will make you feel better. Yeah. I'm not one to suppress negative emotions and feelings, but I do feel that there's a rightful place to wallow. So, of course, if something comes up, something triggering, work through it, right? I always say we don't suppress the emotions, we sit with them, we look at them, we embrace them, we feel them yeah, until they feel that they can pass through us again. Um, But if you are just having a hard time on your fertility journey, see if you can tell yourself, like, okay, I'm going to sit with all of this heaviness during the 2 week wait, which is going to be an intense time anyway, and which is the rightful time, rightful place to look at all the hard stuff. And let's try and distract myself a bit at this time. Just distract myself with life, with aliveness, with just new energy, new input. Unless, of course, your energy is very low, but then you have to go back to my previous points on what to do then. Like, you don't want to force anything, just see if you can work with the energy that's already there. Um, Other things you can do during this time. This is also a great time for new perspectives. You're more creative. This is a great time to explore different avenues that are available to you. So if you notice during the 2 week wait that you really need to change the way you're approaching fertility, this is the time to explore what that could look like. Even if you're in treatment, right? This is a time to brainstorm and see what other options are out there. Another thing that you can do is invest in the intimacy that's there or that's not there with your partner. So if your love life has become all about baby making and it's ruined like the intimacy between the two of you, use this time when you're not really able to conceive yet to step out of those more instrumental forms of connection and find the spark between the two of you again. So go do something fun together. Um, this will be really good, especially when you first start to feel that surge of energy and sensuality, maybe. Um, so just after menstruation, most likely you're not fertile yet. So this is a great time to reconnect with your partner because it will not be about making a baby. I know, easier said than done. This has been my own journey as well. Like, I was so happy when we got to enter fertility treatment because that meant we could take the whole baby making endeavor out of the bedroom. But I also have to say that during that time, with all the work I was doing, I took like even trained to become a Shakti Tantra teacher. I know there's so much you can do to find back that intimacy. So even if it's not there now, use this time to see, okay, let's go on what feels like a first date again. Or yeah, let's see if I can find out something new about my partner today. I have a couple of episodes about this. There's episode 31, 3 ways to reconnect with your partner, where I give some of my own or share some of my own experiences on how to reconnect. There's also episode 6, let's talk about sex with a tantric coach. But just make sure that you are spending time together just for the sake of spending time together. This is like a natural moment in your cycle to want to feel connected. So work with that. I saved the most important point for last. You want to conserve a bit of energy. So this is the pre-ovulation phase. We're not in ovulation just yet. So if you feel that surge of energy, go with it, but also rein it in with maybe 20%. You don't want to burn out straight away. You know, you're coming out of menstruation, you're coming out of that time of deep reflection and rest, hopefully. So make sure that you can easily transition out and you're not rushing it. And if there's a lot of inspiration right now and you feel like, oh, there's all of these new things I want to do, start laying the groundwork, especially when it's projects, maybe projects at work, for example, start laying the groundwork, but sit with it for a couple of days. Like, don't give the big presentation just yet. That's for ovulation. That will be the next episode as well, like how to work with the energy of ovulation for your fertility and your well-being. So just to summarize, yeah, this follicular phase, it's actually an excellent diagnostic tool. If you feel that surge of energy, if you see that beautiful cervical mucus, that fertile cervical mucus, then, at least in terms of hormones, in terms of energetics, you're on the right track, probably. If not, look into what's happening there. If you do feel that surge of energy, you can use it to really introduce new healthy habits for fertility, to reconnect to the joyful inner child and have fun, to explore new perspectives on your fertility journey and to reconnect with your partner. If you feel that this all sounds really interesting, but you could use some support, I actually have 2 private coaching spots available this month. What I usually do with my clients during the first session, we'll tune into where you're at in your cycle. We look at what the big challenges are on your fertility journey, what your body is trying to tell you, where you're, experiencing symptoms. And based on that, I design a couple of sessions that align with your cycle so that we can look at all of these different themes and really work through them so that we, yeah, can get you to the place where you feel really, yeah, that you can conceive from a place of love, trust, and confidence, and that you feel so connected with your body, what it's telling you, and just in a good place when it comes to conception. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find more information on that fertilefeeling.com/private dash coaching. I'll also put it in the show notes. I'll also put the links to those 2 episodes I mentioned on connecting with your partner in the show notes as well, and the book recommendation, Wild Power. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. I didn't really feel like recording this episode this morning. Like my energy is still very low, but I did have fun today, like reading up on all of this information and seeing like what's possible for you. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's, your big takeaways. You can always reach out to me on Instagram at that fertile feeling, or email me at francoise at thatfertilefeeling.com. I always love to hear from you and I always get back to you and hope to see you back next week. Bye bye.